The Roaring Twenties was the period in Western society and Western culture. It ushered a new modern age where people wanted to enjoy life and create new inventions. Let's take a look at Hollywood during the 1920s. It's located in Los Angeles, California, and the location of it was an ideal place for outdoor filming. 85% of U.S. movie production was made in or around Hollywood. Some major studios during this time were Warner Brothers, Paramount, MGM, RKO Radio Production, and 20th Century Fox. They were considered as the Big Five studios in the golden era. In 1923, a designer named Thomas Fisk Goff decided to construct the famous Hollywood sign that we know today. However, it was originally built as Hollywood Land, but they changed it in 1949. The bottom two pictures show Grumman's Chinese Theater, which was opened on May 18, 1927. It is arguably one of the most famous Hollywood cinematic icons. Hollywood wasn't the only place that was booming. Here are some important events during this time. In 1919, the 18th Amendment was ratified, so all forms of alcohol was prohibited during this time. Republican Warren G. Harding became president. In the same year, women won the right to vote. In 1921, the World Series was broadcasting a match between the New York Yankees versus the New York Giants on the radio. In 1925, 40,000 Ku Klux Klansmen marched on Washington. In 1927, Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer became the first talking motion picture and marking the beginning of the end of the silent film era. In 1928, Herbert Hoover became President of the United States. At the same time, Walt Disney introduces a new animated character, Mickey Mouse, to the world. Finally, in 1929, the stock market crashes, which leads America to the Great Depression. Some historical events worldwide include Germany allies ending World War I in 1918 and repairing nations. In 1920, the U.S. Senate rejected the League of Nations. Starting over, go. Some historical events worldwide include Germany allies ending World War I in 1918 and repairing nations. In 1920, the U.S. Senate rejected the League of Nations. At the same time, the Russian Civil War finally came to an end. In Germany, a new party known as the Nazi Party was formed. Lastly, we have the Summer Olympics in 1920, and the first Winter Olympics took place in France in 1924.
The Charleston, Black Bottom, Flea Hop, Foxtrot, and Lindy Hop were all popular dances of the 1920s. These dance crazes were for women and men who valued extreme sports and looser morals, which leads me to the fads of the 1920s. Fads from this era consisted of dance marathons that lasted hours, days, and even weeks. Next fad was pole sitting, which was a sort of competition as to who can sit on a flagpole the longest. Then lastly, the Pets candy. It was invented originally as a substitute for cigarettes. After a few adjustments, it became very popular, especially among kids. As for popular games, some of them were the yo-yo, marbles, and the Ouija board. Here are a list of some of the most popular songs of the decade. On your left, we have Louis Armstrong, a well-liked jazz musician. To your right is Bessie Smith, a well-liked blues musician. Marilyn Miller's career began as early as 1914. In the 1920s, she starred in musicals such as Sally, Sunny, and Rosalie. Ethel Waters began her Broadway career after her singing career. She starred in the musical Africana in 1927 and in many more Broadway musicals thereafter. Al Johnson starred in many New York musicals throughout the 1920s and often wore blackface on stage. Florence Mills is said to have paved the way for other black female stars during the Harlem Renaissance. She made her debut in the hit musical Shuffle Along. She later starred in Plantation Revue and Dixie to Broadway.
In the 1920s, Art Deco was the current architectural rave. Art Deco used decorative ideas to design buildings and interiors. This kind of architectural style was showy and it was made to attract people and tourists. This artistic form originated in France and was accepted globally. It hit greatly in England, France, the Mediterranean, and the United States. Most of this art was limited edition and amplified the emergence of fashion and style in this era. These three pictures are great examples. The picture on the left is a huge donut, the picture in the middle is a huge to-go box, and the picture in the right is a huge sausage. However, not all architecture was for showy purposes. Many buildings had very elegant and sophisticated interior designs. They included things such as beautiful drapes, fireplaces, paintings, and rooms filled to the brim with accessories. The insides of elegant homes were often painted with bright red and orange colors in their living rooms, stairs, and floors. The less expensive homes decorated their interiors with olive greens, faded reds, and gray cream neutrals. Overall, it looked pleasing to the eye. Skyscrapers became more popular and signaled societies were urbanizing. House structures began to look more modern. For example, its designs were simple with clean lines, basic shapes, and forms. They decreased in cost as well. There was a huge difference between rich homes and poor homes. For starters, rich houses lived at the top of hills, away from factories, pollution, and disease, while the poor had to endure those tough times. Poor homes. They were often too small for those who lived inside, they were designed by people with no skill, and they were often prefabricated iron houses that were shipped overseas. The outside of these houses were very dirty and unstable. These iron houses made winter and summer unbearable. Rich homes. They were very sanitary, triple the size of a poor house, separate bedrooms for all the inhabitants, very clean, had big windows, tile roofs, and subtle colors. Some of the famous architects of this era were Walter Gropius, Gerrit Rietveld, Jan Wills, and Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Walter Gropius was known for his Art Deco pieces. Gerrit Rietveld and Jan Wills were known for their vestigial art forms, and Ludwig Mies was known for his modernistic style.
Women in the Jazz Age did not leave the house without a hat or some type of head covering. Fortunately for them, there was no reason to do so with a wide range of hats and headbands that were available to them. Although the snug-fitting cloche hat was the most common, it certainly was not the only 20s hat style. Women had the option to choose from a garden hat, a musketeer hat, a tam o' shanter's hat, a sporty beret, a toque hat, a turban, and of course the cloche hats as well. Next, I will be talking about the clothes that women wore. This was a home dress. This was common streetwear or going out clothes. When women went to church, this is the clothing that they would wear, long sleeves. Back then, often people would spill the tea by drinking tea in these beautiful dresses. We also have our college clothes and sportswear. But of course, it wouldn't be the 1920s if we didn't include dresses that were used for dancing and dinners. Other attires included traveling beach attires and work clothing. Lastly, there's an example of the mature ladies' fashion. Next is gentlemen's fashion in the 1920s. This is an example of casual clothes. In this picture, you see slim suits, bow ties, and a straw boater hat. To the left, you see a Peaky Blinders suit, which is a man of the lower class but has some wealth to dress a little bit better than the gang. Talking about gangs, in the middle is the gangster suit. And lastly, the average man's workwear. Last but not least is the formal wear. And of course, with the formal wear comes men's shoes and hats. Lastly, for 12th night, we picked
Act 4, Scene 3. As you can see, we picked Coco Chanel to play Lady Olivia, and Sebastian will be portrayed by Arthur Capel.